story is about Tommy Jodry, who lost his life at the age of 21 in 2019. And the person who unalived him, David Allen Knight, is still at large. Tommy is from a small town in San Luis Obispo where he sold art and cactuses to make money. And that's actually how he met David Allen Knight. He bought a cactus from him in August of 2019. Knight befriended Tommy by telling him he has connections to the art world and could help get his art published. Now, over the course of the next few weeks, Knight and Tommy would text quite often, with Knight asking him a lot of personal questions. At this point in time, Tommy agrees to meet with Knight on September 14th, the day of the unaliving, to go to the architectural graveyard in Cal Poly so they could look at art and talk marketing. On that day, Knight picked up Tommy from his home around 2 p.m., met his father, and then they took off. Well, the architectural graveyard was closed that day, so they decided to go get lunch, drive around and look at things, and then ultimately ended up at the Frog and Peach Bar that night at 7 p.m. At that point, Knight decided to open up a tap and proceed to fill Tommy with alcohol, to the point that where his blood alcohol content, when everything was said and done, was a .35, I believe. I might be a little off on the number, but that's still very high. Throughout their time at the bar, you could see them constantly toasting together, with Tommy slamming back his drink, and Knight barely putting his lips to the glass and then swapping his glass out with Tommy's. Around 8:45 p.m., they were cut off by the bartender because Tommy was incoherent and Knight seemed practically sober. During the time before they left, Knight was constantly getting very handsy with Tommy, even going so far as to grab the brim of his hat and pulling his head down towards his crotch, which Tommy did not like at all, and it was made abundantly clear in the footage. At this point, he realized it was time to go, so Tommy left the bar, followed out by Knight, and Tommy decided to walk away from the direction of Knight's car, trying to get away from him, even going as far as to crossing the street, and that's where he fell and hit his head and was knocked unconscious. At this point, there was a woman that had been following them, and she called 911 to let them know what she had seen. And instead of sending an ambulance, which they definitely should have done, they sent a patrol car. So by the time the patrol car had arrived, Knight had already caught up to Tommy, shaking him awake, so the patrol car didn't see anything wrong, so they didn't even stop, they just kept on going. As soon as Tommy regained consciousness, he freaked out because Knight just kept trying to touch him, so he started to run away from him, ultimately being followed by Knight. During Tommy's attempt to flee Knight, he dropped his phone, and that was picked up by Knight. While trying to flee, Tommy was constantly screaming for help over and over, but nobody would do anything. At this point, Tommy ran into a parking structure where he was seen by several people that he was trying to flee from Knight while continuously being followed. At 9:15 p.m., cops were called to be notified that a man had fallen from the top of the parking garage, and at this point, they finally decided to send an ambulance. While an officer was attending to Tommy, Knight approached an officer to ask him what had happened. He told him that he knew him, gave him his full name and the city that he lived in, but stated he didn't want to go on record that he knew him. What I find interesting is that even though Knight was asking what had happened, he then tried to tell the cops that he was hit by a car, and the cop had told him no, he fell from the parking structure. At this point in time, Knight had walked away but was still watching from a distance, and when the ambulance arrived, he decided to text Tommy's phone saying, "Where are you?" But Knight had his phone. Knight continued to tell passersby that Tommy was hit by a car, and when Tommy was transferred to Sierra Vista Hospital, he was pronounced dead at 9:49 p.m. At 10:20 p.m., Knight decided to show up to Tommy's parents' house, where he was greeted by his father, asking, "Where is Tommy? I haven't been able to get a hold of him." Knight then handed his father Tommy's phone, stating that he found it on the ground and that he lost Tommy somewhere throughout the night, but he heard police sirens and he saw a body on the ground of somebody who looked like Tommy, but the police wouldn't give him any information. It was at this point that Tommy's father, William, had called at Sierra Vista Hospital, and they confirmed that Tommy had sadly passed away. William asked Knight to leave, asking him to return the following day so he could explain to him what had happened, but as you could probably expect, Knight never showed up, he never called them, he was never seen or heard of again by them. What's crazy about this whole thing is I feel like the police completely dropped the ball by not even getting David Allen Knight's information. Because if they would have ran his information, they would have seen that he is a convicted felon that has SA charges. They also dropped the ball by not interviewing a single person that was walking in and out of that parking structure at the time of the events. I'm still learning more and more about this case thanks to Alma Rose and the playlist that she created on her page. I'm going to tag her in the description. Go to her pinned videos and you will find the first one. She has been in close personal contact with Tommy's family and continues to spread awareness about this, as I am going to do alongside her. So there will be more videos to come out with more information that I gather from what she has posted, but I advise everybody to like, comment, repost. Let's get this out there. And let's do what we can to bring justice for Tommy and his family. And if you want to read more about it, you can go to justiceforthomas.com, and that is where his family has posted everything. But stay tuned for more videos to come out on the subject.